Iraq war veteran James Hackemer had survived a landmine explosion, spent 6 weeks in a coma, and endured several clinical deaths. For him, a ride on Darien Lake's Ride of Steel was more than a thrill. It was a step back toward feeling alive again. But only minutes after the coaster began its climb, James would once again find himself on the edge of death. Today I'll tell you about 5 incidents when an amusement park turned, in an instant, into a park of horrors. But always, viewer discretion is advised. 1. James Hackemer. On Friday, July 8, 2011, James Hackemer had one goal in mind: to ride every roller coaster at Darien Lake Theme Park in New York, surrounded by his sister, nephew, and 2 little daughters, Callie and Mackenzie. He was energetic and full of life, different from other visitors only by the wheelchair beneath him. In 2008, in Iraq, his armored vehicle hit a landmine. The explosion tore off both his legs and damaged his internal organs. Despite 2 cardiac arrests and 6 weeks in a coma, James survived, learned to walk on prosthetics, and became a symbol of strength among wounded veterans. He often said, "I lost my legs, but not my life." That day he chose the Ride of Steel, the park's tallest coaster, standing 63 meters high. With help from his nephew and park staff, James transferred from his wheelchair into the front car. The operator pulled down the metal lap bar until it clicked in place. It was designed to lock across the rider's thighs and waist. But since James had no legs, it didn't secure him properly. He noticed it and asked if everything was safe. The operator replied, "One click is enough." The train began its climb. From below, his daughters waved while his sister filmed the moment they had all been waiting for, the joy at the very top. Then came the drop, a free fall at more than 110 kilometers per hour. James felt the rush of air and the thrill he had missed for years. As the coaster rose toward the second hill, about 45 meters high, a sudden gust of wind blew his cap away. He reached for it instinctively, just as the car plunged into another steep descent. Without legs to brace himself, James slipped under the lap bar. Witnesses saw him lift from his seat, strike the front of the train, and disappear beneath the track. Within a minute, paramedics found him on the grass below. The impact had caused a traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, and massive internal damage. Injuries no one could survive. Witnesses told police the same thing again and again. His hat flew off, he reached for it, and then he was gone. Investigators confirmed the ride was mechanically sound. The failure was human. At the entrance of Ride of Steel, a sign clearly read, "No riders without 2 legs." Yet the operator who ignored that warning was never held accountable. The only justice the family received was a 7-figure settlement, money that went toward securing the future of James's 2 daughters. After the tragedy, his sister said quietly, "They told us he wouldn't survive the war, but he lived 3 more years. Those 3 years were a blessing." Some rides are truly unsafe for people with amputations, but sometimes, even an ordinary person is never completely safe once the ride begins. 2. Rosa Esparza. On July 19, 2013, 52-year-old Rosa Esparza arrived at Six Flags over Texas with her family, hoping for a simple day away from everyday worries. They made their way toward the park's tallest attraction, the Texas Giant, a hybrid steel and wood coaster rising more than 45 meters into the air. On the loading platform, Rosa took a seat on the 3rd row while her family sat near the front. When the operator lowered the lap bar, Rosa hesitated. At just about 1 meter 57 tall and weighing a little over 90 kilograms, she felt the bar didn't press tightly enough against her body. "It's not fully closed," she said quietly. The operator leaned in, checked the lock, and repeated the notorious line, "One click is safe." In 2013, the Texas Giant had no seatbelts, only the single lap bar. Rosa had no choice but to trust him. As the train climbed the 45-meter hill, Rosa smiled at the view while her daughter and son-in-law waved from the front row. At the top, the cars plunged forward, accelerating to over 100 kilometers per hour. Passengers later recalled seeing Rosa bracing herself, pushing hard against the seat, but the force of the drop lifted her free. She screamed as her body was thrown from the car, struck a steel beam, and fell nearly 23 meters onto a metal roof below. Her family saw it happen and screamed, begging for the ride to stop. Paramedics quickly climbed onto the tunnel roof. Even they, people who had seen countless injuries, could hardly believe what they were looking at. The impact was so powerful, it had nearly torn Rosa's body in half. The next day, flowers and candles covered the park's entrance. One sign read, "Safe rides are not a privilege." The investigation confirmed what many feared. The single-lap bar was never designed to secure shorter or heavier riders. The Texas Giant remained closed for weeks while the park installed additional seatbelts, new waist restraints, and test seats at the platform so visitors could check their fit before boarding. The case was settled quietly out of court. The family received an undisclosed compensation, though reports suggested several $1,000,000, but no amount could replace a mother who simply came to spend a happy day at the park. But sometimes even a water slide can become a killer when the attraction's ambition goes too far. 3. Caleb Schwab. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, the Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City hosted a special event known as Legislators' Day, meaning it was reserved for families of state legislators. And among the guests were the Representative Scott Schwab and his wife and their 4 sons. From below, they watched in awe as the park's main attraction towered above them. Verrückt, the insane one. Standing 51 meters tall, higher than Niagara Falls, it held the record as the tallest water slide in the world. That record was all 10-year-old Caleb Schwab could think about. While his parents waited at the bottom, Caleb and his brother began the long climb to the top. At the launch platform, an operator explained that each raft needed exactly 3 riders to stay balanced and that 2 children couldn't ride together. Caleb's brother stepped aside to wait for the next run while Caleb took the front seat with 2 women behind him. The operator checked their straps, made sure everyone was gripping the handles, and signaled for release. The raft dropped into its first plunge, accelerating to 110 kilometers per hour. According to the design, it was supposed to slow slightly on the second rise before gliding to the finish, but something went wrong. The weight in the raft wasn't evenly distributed. Caleb, who weighed just 34 kilograms, sat in the front, while the 2 women behind him together weighed over 200. The center of mass considerably shifted backwards, lifting the nose of the raft into the air. Now, a safety net covered the entire length of the chute, supported by metal hoops meant to catch loose objects, but not people. As the raft hit the crest of the second hill, it went airborne and slammed into one of the hoops. The metal bar caught Caleb's head, cutting through his neck and instantly decapitating him. When the raft came crashing back into the water, the 2 women were alive but covered in blood. One had a broken jaw. The other suffered multiple facial fractures. Around the pool, panic erupted. People screamed. Caleb's parents ran toward the slide, and his brother stood frozen, whispering, "He just flew off." The park shut down that same day. Investigators soon discovered that at least 13 riders had been injured on Verrückt before the accident. But management had ignored every warning. What's even more infuriating, the slide's lead designer had no formal engineering degree or state certification required for high-intensity rides, and testing had been done without official oversight. The park's owners and designers were charged with involuntary manslaughter, but the case was dismissed in 2019. The Schwab family received more than $20 million in settlements, one of the largest ever awarded for an amusement park ride death. Verrückt was dismantled in 2018, and 3 years later, the park itself was leveled. Caleb Schwab's story remains a painful reminder of what happens when thrill and profit are valued more than safety. Yet 35 years before this tragedy, in another Kansas City park, death didn't come for a guest. It came for a young man working to keep the rides running. 4. William Heathcote. On July 9, 1981, while the Worlds of Fun Park in Kansas City was shifting into its evening rush, 20-year-old William Heathcote entered a narrow tunnel beneath the Zambezi Zinger roller coaster. It was his first summer job, one he had taken to save money for college. That day, he had been asked to check a short section of a track and retrieve a tool that had been left behind during the morning inspection, a simple task that should have only taken minutes. According to safety protocol, the ride operator was required to stop the coaster, record it in a logbook, lock out the system, and confirm over the radio that power had been cut. Only then could a technician safely enter the track area. But the radio in William's pocket stayed silent. He assumed the operator had already locked the controls and simply forgotten to confirm it. William stepped under the supports, surrounded by the smell of oil and hot metal. In the dim space, he spotted a glint of steel and bent down to pick up the tool. Then came the sound. A faint click, a heavy snap, and a rising whine. It was a sound that should have been impossible if the system had been powered down. William lifted his head. instinctively searching for a way out, but there was nowhere to move. The first car entered the tunnel. At that same moment, the operator tried to reach him on the radio, and the silence that answered told him everything. The train roared through the passage so low that the steel undercarriage struck William's head. The blow was sharp and lethal. The ride was stopped immediately, and medics rushed to the scene. There was nothing they could do. The impact had decapitated him instantly. The investigation concluded that the equipment had not failed. The failure was human. The operator, rushing through routine steps, had not completed the lockout procedure, leaving the ride powered while William was still beneath the track. After the tragedy, OSHA, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, added the case to its national training program for amusement park workers. New technicians across the country were taught his story as a warning that even one missed switch can cost a life. Still, the real horror begins when terrified children start falling from the sky. 5. Big Dipper. On May 30th, 1972, a group of school children from South London arrived at Battersea Park Fun Fair to celebrate the start of the summer break. Their goal was the park's most famous ride, the wooden roller coaster known as the Big Dipper. It stood 15 meters tall with 3 climbs and sharp turns that thrilled its riders. 2 years earlier, in 1970, a fire had nearly destroyed the Big Dipper. It was quietly rebuilt using second-hand parts imported from the United States. Safety inspections were rushed, and at the time, regulations were much more loose. People eagerly believed in the power of engineering. Among those in line were 15-year-old Allison Comerford, 14-year-old Aaron Talker, and 8-year-old Shirley Nash in a bright red dress. They had pulled their pocket money for tickets, excited for their first ride of the summer break. When their turn came, the children climbed into a 3-car train. The operator pulled the lever, and the train began its slow ascent, carrying 31 young passengers toward the top. At about 9 meters up, just short of the peak, a sharp crack split the air. The chain that pulled the train to the top had snapped. For a brief moment, the cars hung motionless, then began rolling backward. The anti-rollback system that was supposed to stop the train, but at that specific time, failed completely. The operator grabbed the manual brake, but the handle jammed. The train picked up speed, racing downhill in reverse at nearly 60 kilometers per hour. At the base of the track, where the rails curved back toward the loading area, the cars slammed into the bend. The impact crushed the front cars, throwing the rear ones off the track. Allison and several children in the front car were thrown forward, falling nearly 3 meters to the ground. Their injuries were fatal. Aaron felt pain surge through his body but could barely move, trapped beneath the broken beams. Parents, workers, and bystanders ran toward the wreck, pulling away splintered wood and twisted metal with their bare hands. Witnesses later said it looked like the aftermath of an explosion. Children lay among the wreckage, some crying, others silent in shock. Rescuers pulled Shirley Nash from one of the rear cars, almost unharmed. They led her onto the narrow platform that ran beside the track. For a brief moment, it seemed she had survived the disaster. Then, in a gruesome twist of fate, a rotten plank snapped beneath her. Shirley fell 3 meters onto the shattered remains of the coaster. She became the 5th child to die on that day. 13 others suffered broken bones, head injuries, and deep cuts. The next morning, headlines called it the disaster that should have never happened. Investigators documented 51 serious defects that had been ignored for years. Park officials were charged with negligence, but later acquitted. Of all the families who filed lawsuits, only one ever won. In 1975, survivor Aaron Talker brought his case to high court and was awarded £5,500 in compensation, about £58,000 in today's money. After the tragedy, Battersea Fun Fair fell into decline and closed for good a few years later. But what about today? How many parks still run on worn-out machines and careless hands, waiting for the next fatal mistake? We don't know, and we can only hope you're never there to find out. And now, which of these stories struck you the most? Tell us in the comments and share if you've ever witnessed safety violations at an amusement park. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to hear about more stories like this.